This week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry with agriculture broadcasters Orion Samuelson and Max Armstrong, and featuring agriculture meteorologist Greg Solier. This week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH and your local Case IH dealer. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, the cattlemen and women were in a celebratory mood with good prices and good profits ahead. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our broadcast this weekend. I know I look as lonely as the Maytag repairman here by myself. Mr. Pearson was out on the road this week. Mike had the opportunity to visit with cattlemen and women from all over the United States as the Cattlemen Convention was in Houston, Texas this year. Some might have had some travel problems getting back home with a big storm system right over the heart of the country. We'll talk about weather in a few minutes with our ag meteorologist, Greg Solier. Now let's go to Mike at the Cattlemen's Convention.
Yes, Max, I'm down here in Houston for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association Annual Convention and Trade Show. And I'll tell you what, the crowd is big, the crowd is optimistic, and there's a lot of people here really fired up about the future of the beef industry. Looking back over the last 2 years, I've had the chance to connect with growers, and we've talked about the challenges they've faced, whether it's processing plant slowdowns or the drought across the northern plains, and now the drought in the southern plains. We're in a year where a lot of these producers are ready to make money, and they are excited about the opportunity that's coming in the future. But they're also concerned. There are conversations happening here all about the policy that is being decided in Washington, D.C. One of the core issues is the cattle market itself. Is it priced well? Should it be changed? All of these have been up for discussion, and we had a chance to connect with Don Schiefelbein. He's the incoming president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and we talked about these policies that they're watching.
Well, as you know, we take our policy recommendations or requirements from our members. So it depends where the members fall. The members are in heated debates as we speak, trying to figure out where common sense brings us. You know, we've got everything from having the government pretty heavily involved to we're just going to do it our own way to everything in between. And I think this is kind of where the sausage is made, if you will, right? And this is where we kind of figure out where our policy is going to take us going forward.
And it sounds as though there's a lot of frustration with the cattle marketing setup we've got right now in this country. There's just a lot of disagreement on how to best address it. Would that be a fair way to say it?
Absolutely, but if you look at it historically, you know, we've had the biggest economic disruption ever in the history of the cattle business, right? So when you think there's some frustration, well, when you face the biggest one in the history of the world, we're going to have some economic frustration. Where we have to come down is we have to make sure common sense prevails so that in the midst of this economic storm, we don't make decisions that upright the ship, if you will, over the long haul. So hopefully we come up with policy that's steady as you go. These are some refinements or some additions that'll help make this market more stable for the best of all long term, but maybe not get us in a spot that we're in dangerous waters.
Dangerous waters. Don, we're also talking a lot about the waters of the U.S. rule. How do cattlemen view the rewriting of WOTUS?
Well, they're extremely frustrated, right? Here we spent an enormous amount of time, an enormous amount of effort, 2 years, if you will, in the making to get the waters of the U.S. the way it ought to be, where navigable waters becomes the definition, right? So that was a huge win for us, only to see the pen of a president shake all that policy up and put us back to square one, where we have to then go back to the courts, build our case, and begin to create that battle to get us back where we need to be.
What are some of the priorities that cattlemen have when we're renegotiating this waters of the U.S.?
You know, I think they want to get back to that definition of navigable, that we don't want government oversight across all of our waters, but if they're navigable, that's probably their jurisdiction. And if we can kind of have a common sense rule that says basically public navigable waters are what they have jurisdiction over, I think that's where we need to land. And from a regulation standpoint, the government's far from that right now. They want to basically wherever water hits the ground, which is everywhere but maybe Nevada, right, in some places, but that's where they want to have jurisdiction over it.
Don, what other policies is NCBA watching in this year ahead?
Well, you know, you've seen the government spend crazy, right? When you spend trillions and trillions of dollars, you have to find pay-fors. And what they typically do is they find the pay-fors in a smaller industry with large revenues, but a smaller population. Guess what? That fits agriculture, doesn't it? So they were squarely set on saying we should attack capital gains, we should attack step-up basis, we should even tackle transfer taxes. So all these taxes were being discussed and pushed on the backs of the agricultural producers. Thank goodness NCBA has a voice in Washington, D.C., and we actually, to this point, have got them killed in committee. So we're in a good position right now, but over time, they still have to pay for those trillions of dollars, so I don't think we're out of the safety zone yet.
That was Don Schiefelbein, newly elected president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. But it's not just policy on folks' minds down here in Houston. The markets are as well. Randy Block, the CEO of CattleFax, was also here at the NCBA convention. I had a chance to talk to him, especially about the USDA's recently released cattle inventory report, which shows that this beef herd here in the United States continues to shrink.
Well, they really are. You know, we've been fighting the drought across the whole western United States here for the last several years, so no surprise the numbers were tighter. I think all the analysts had the numbers declining. Again, we're still sitting here today with about 35% of the nation's beef cow herd that is under drought conditions. So we really don't want to see this cow herd get a lot smaller. It's time for producers to start making some money. And again, longer term, if we're going to be able to continue to maintain our market share globally, we don't want our herd to shrink much more.
So let's talk about just how much the herds have shrunk. Randy, I mean, are we done with the cattle cycle? Are we on the downward slope?
Oh, no doubt about it. You know, the cattle numbers peaked and we're back in here in the earlier part of the previous decade where the cow numbers peaked in 2019. Our fed slaughter was scheduled to be at the peak in 2020, and then this thing called COVID came along, and it pushed our fed cattle slaughter numbers back to where they were about as big in 2021 as they were in 2019. So COVID has really had a 2-year impact on the cattle cycle. But I just take everybody back and think about it. 2014 and 15 was the smallest supplies in the cycle and our highest prices. 2020, 21, 2019 to 21 because of COVID was our peak numbers and our lowest prices in the cycle. Markets are headed higher, will be trending higher now for the next 3 to 4 years.
But production is so important. You touched on COVID limiting workers' hours in the slaughter plants. What have you heard from processors? Are they making progress on that front?
Well, you got the data every day you can measure it. So, I mean, it's not hearsay. You can see it, you can measure the number of animals we're getting harvested. The bottom line is pre-COVID, we were able to harvest about 98,000 head of fed cattle a day. Since we've had COVID, again, a big day now is 94, 95,000 head a day. So it doesn't seem like that much, 3 or 4 or 5,000 a day, but you do that times 5, and it's a real number. Again, you put a lot of pressure on these plants to run on Saturdays, and they've been running on Saturdays since for really the last 3 years to be able to work through these numbers.
So Randy, the cattle feeder, the cow-calf producer, they'd all like to see a little more money in their pocket. Do you see cash-fed cattle prices trending higher all year?
We're going to trend higher all year. We're going to trend higher here for the next couple of years. I mean, there's the margins already in the system. We work through the backlog. We don't have to push wholesale or retail prices higher. It's just a matter of the markets reorganizing the way some of that money flows. And so yes, cattle prices will push higher deep into the spring. Calf prices will be higher all year. Feeder cattle prices will be higher. So it's about time our producers got a good payday and they're going to get one.
All right, that is good news for a lot of folks tuning in right now. Randy, on the demand front, we've seen U.S. consumers spending a lot of money for beef. Do you think that's going to continue, and will they be willing to if inflation heats up?
Well, inflation's a real deal. I mean, we haven't seen inflation rates like this since back in the 70s and early 80s. So you put a context around that and you see what's going on, these bottlenecks, these supply chain issues we have all around the globe. When you have more and more of the economy turning back on and we still have these bottlenecks, we're going to have inflation. There's no way they can control it regardless of what they say, so it's real. We need to be prepared for it here over the next 12 to 24 months. I think it's going to be pretty snappy type of inflation that we see in here.
We'll have more with Randy Block of Cattle Facts when we return.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by AgriGold, your seed ally in the field, with unparalleled options that perform on your farm. Learn more at agrigold.com. Well, we have more to learn from respected analyst Randy Block as he visited with Mike at the Cattlemen's Convention. Let's go back to Mike in Houston.
Thank you, Max. And I'll tell you, one of the major topics of conversation this past year has been international trade. I asked Randy Block of Cattle Facts if the international markets were going to remain strong throughout 2022.
Not just beef trade, protein trade. The U.S. is the largest beef producer on the planet. We're the largest poultry producer on the planet and the third largest pork producer. So this year, in 2021, we exported about 19 billion pounds of protein. That's 18.5% of all the protein we produced in the United States. So global consumers love what we're producing. We are producing the safest, highest quality meat products on the planet, bar none. So again, the U.S. consumers have realized that over time, but the global consumers are finding value in that. From a beef standpoint, put this in perspective. When we had BSE back in 2003, the value of beef exports was $175 a head. In 2021, the value of beef and beef byproduct exports was $430 a head. $430 a head. So the contribution these export markets make to the overall value proposition of the livestock we're producing is phenomenal. Japan's still our number one largest market. South Korea has been huge growth over the last 7 or 8 years. China has come out of nowhere and our third biggest market now. Again, we continue to see strong growth into those markets. Even countries like Taiwan is a big player. Hong Kong, even though they've slowed down, they're still a significant market. So I think it's important that everybody out there understands what kind of contribution these export markets make. And again, we have to listen to those consumers too.
Indeed we do. Randy, on the trade side, are there any issues from Washington, D.C. that could impact trade you're keeping an eye on as 2022 rolls along?
Well, again, we need market access. We need market access, and whenever we have some of these issues that are developing, these geopolitical issues on whether we end up being thrown in the middle of one of these situations, that's always a concern. It's always a concern. So hopefully we won't have to deal with that, but we've had every other kind of black swan in the last 3 or 4 years, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised.
Well, one of those ongoing concerns for producers is feed costs. Obviously, we've seen all the feed grain markets continue to rally. Randy, as you look out on this year, are feed costs going to be a concern for the remainder?
Well, I think you have to look at that. We have global demand that is phenomenal for these grains. Again, we've had markets that have had issues. We've had areas of South America that hadn't been able to raise as much grain as what they have historically. We've got the issue with Russia into the potential conflict with the Ukraine and the impact that has on Europe's oil supplies, et cetera. And again, a lot of the Ukraine is a large exporter of both corn and beans onto the global market. So these are wheat, I should say. So it is a big deal as these things unfold. We have to keep our eyes on those.
These geopolitical risks could impact all farmers as 2022 moves on.
Absolutely, and it's in all aspects of our business. Energy costs, natural gas, oil costs. Obviously, we're already looking at elevated feed costs. Our farmers needed a payday. It had been a long time from 2014 to 2020 since they really had been able to make any money. They're finally making some money. And again, I think we're going to have strong prices all year. Not that they have to get a lot higher once we get past spring planting, but we could still have a significant rally into that spring time period on both corn and soybeans. And I shouldn't leave wheat out of that picture.
Well, there's a lot of factors at play in the beef market right now, but I'm glad to hear there's something for producers to be excited about. Our thanks to Randy Block, CEO of Cattle Facts.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform. combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Well, if you're a regular viewer, you know so well how Chad Colby is into the technology of anything. But then you have something with an engine, and you put the two together. Oh my, he's in heaven. Let's see what's on his mind this weekend.
Have you shopped for a new vehicle? There's some great new technology. And I want to share that with you on this week's tech segment, because if you haven't paid attention, it's a little hard to even follow.
It's all about connectivity. It's all about Bluetooth. It's all about Wi-Fi hotspots. It's all about the technology that's leading up to autonomous vehicles, such as the things that I think a lot of people have: lane assist, parking assist, front assist, back assist, you name it. And if it has to do with safety or technology, that's the big deal right now.
What do you think's coming? I mean, what has got your attention for the stuff that's maybe a year or two down the road? Anything?
You know what? Here's the thing. Everything is very intuitive, and they've tried to take technology and really dumb it down because they realize there's a lot of technology there that people weren't using because they didn't understand it. So I think the interactivity between phones, home, and car is where the future is.
I know the Ram truck I just got has that big screen in it, the same one it had on my previous one from a few years ago. But the new one works a lot better. It's
right.
Easy to use.
Well, and that's what they're doing. It's a lot of touchscreen technology, and the real deal is the mobile apps. And you're able to start your car, find your car, unlock your car, honk your car's horn. If your car is stolen, it alerts you. There's SOS features on it. It really will become another part of your daily life.
I'll tell you what, this technology around our vehicles is changing so fast, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more to talk about. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
And I suspect Chad heard this week that Ford Motor Company may be coming out of the future with magnets in the pickup truck bed so your stuff's not flying around back there. Oh yeah, I am sure he'll be all over that if that product does eventually come to market. Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. We talk about transportation issues from time to time because they are so important to help farmers not only get the inputs to their farm, but to get the final products to market. And the Port of Oakland, California has been in the news over the past few days. Dan Ronan from Transport Topics is joining us this weekend. Hey, Dan, they're really going to bring that port to life, and for a very important reason. We need to be able to ship beef out of there, right?
Well, indeed, Max. As you know, Asia is such a big export market for the agriculture community, especially when it comes to frozen protein. The Port of Oakland, realizing this, that beginning in March, they will be opening up a 22-acre site, off-site, right next to the port, specifically for agricultural exports. And this will be something that the port officials have been working on for a couple of months. There's a lot of reasons behind it that we can talk about as we have our conversation. But this is very exciting, especially for those in the agricultural transportation community.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture is a partner on this. They're helping make it possible. With actually some money coming into it, right?
Several $1 million, in fact. This project is going to cost about $5 to $7 million, depending on who you talk to. And the USDA is coming up with about 60% of the money. The port is coming up with the rest of it. But yes, the USDA clearly wants to see Oakland focus a lot of its exports on agriculture.
You know, to a lot of our grain farmers, other ports are more important. New Orleans, that's an export port, a very significant one for us. And then, of course, SeaTac, Seattle, Tacoma. But when you look at these high-value exports, this is really going to put Oakland in the spotlight even more, it seems.
Well, it is. And Oakland, Max, has had a couple of challenges here the last couple of years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Long Beach and Los Angeles have had 20 million plus containers over the last year. The numbers have seen a double-digit increase in those two Southern California facilities, while Oakland actually saw its export volume decline by 8% at a time when all of the other ports and those on the East Coast were surging. And it's all tied to shipping fees. It turns out that the shipping companies the big shipping companies that we know so much about, they've been making very extraordinary profits, but they've been making a lot of money because they can take their product to Long Beach and Los Angeles, drop it off, and then head back immediately in the other direction across the Pacific, get another load of cargo, and come back. And usually there had been an intermediate stop in Oakland, and they stopped doing that because it just wasn't profitable.
There was a real concern also, was there not, about containers going back to Asia empty? That wasn't helping either, was it?
No, it wasn't, because empty containers they just don't generate any revenue. So that's been another problem. And also because of Oakland's location, and there's not just the central California location, which is agricultural community and such a rich farm community in terms of nuts and berries and cabbage, all sorts of things like that. But the Port of Oakland has direct rail service to the Midwest, to Iowa, to Omaha. And that's really where we can expect to see a lot of this frozen protein, refrigerated protein, coming out of Iowa, coming out of Nebraska, coming out of Illinois, and it's going to be shipped by rail to Oakland and then put on freighters and then shipped across the ocean.
If I'm not mistaken, both the BNSF and the UP come right in there to the Port of Oakland, right nearby, correct?
They sure do. They do. They've got the direct lines into that facility, and that's what makes it so attractive. There's direct rail line. It takes a couple days to get the product there. They bring it in on the refrigerated cars, and with this terminal, with this offsite terminal, the goal is to really speed up the operations.
One thing that occurred to me this week, just to switch gears just a little bit, with that big storm system right over the heartland, snarling traffic, bogging down everything as it can do, that hasn't helped either in our logistics of this winter, right?
No, it hasn't. As a matter of fact, the governor of Missouri put out a warning several days in anticipation of this ice storm that Thursday and Friday that the Midwest is dealing with, telling truck drivers, don't even bother to travel. Just park your truck, get off the main interstates that run through Kansas City and St. Louis and I-55 through southern Illinois and the like. Just get off the highway and park your vehicles, wait it out. Of course, if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that's an area, having lived there, Max, that they don't do real well. The LBJ, the 635 with ice, or 75 called the High 5. It's a U.S. Highway 75. It's like a roller type of rink, almost, in terms of if you get out there in ice and snow and the like. Nothing good's going to happen if you're going to be driving a commercial truck on a half-inch of ice.
I'm smiling just a little bit because early in the week I talked with a friend who's an independent trucker, and he's been in the business a long time. One of those good guys, really takes pride in the industry. He said, I'm going to park it and stay home with Mama by the fire here for a few days.
Probably a good idea. And this storm is so big, it stretches all the way from New Mexico all the way up into Ontario. It was a relatively narrow band in terms of its size, but it's really packing quite a punch.
And right over some key logistics geography for the United States, too. Great to visit with you, Dan. We hope to have you on again sometime.
Will do, Max. This is fun.
Dan Ronan, Transport Topics, and he's on Sirius XM Channel 146 there, just right down from Rural Radio Channel 147. There's more coming up. Stay with us. This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. We're right in the middle of the meeting season, the learning season, and one buzz among farmers again this winter is what that carbon market can do for them. What kind of income could it mean for the farm? There are some new names operating in that space. Seems like we hear a new corporate name about every day. One that we've been hearing from is the Agoro Carbon Alliance. Todd Carlton is with them. I talked with him the other day and I asked him, how does a farmer qualify the farm?
We go through the steps of what are the practices that you can participate in and what they mean to you economically. It's actually pretty simple for as complex as the carbon markets are.
What do you say to the producer who might ask you whether they should wait? I mean, I remember a grower asking me a couple of years ago, should I get involved in this right now? And I said, well, let's wait till the dust settles a little bit. But what do you tell people, Todd?
Yeah, that's a very big question, and it has an impact on an operation. What I say is if you are already walking down the path to implement some of these practices, get on now, because you actually might disqualify yourself by changing some of these things that you know improve soil health. So honestly, it's something, if you think it's a fit, you should jump on now, because waiting honestly disqualifies you sometimes.
Can you stack this with other programs?
You can, and even the credits themselves can be stacked. The one thing that you cannot do is double dip. So
on the same acreage.
Yeah, you can't sign up for us and say one of our competitors, because that could be considered double dipping. But with government programs, there is the possibility.
What about the grower who might have some data concerns about it being used for the third-party uses?
Yeah, so that's a very big concern, considering how important data is these days. What I tell them is look at our statement for data privacy, considering that we're based out of Norway as a global company. The standards and restrictions that we have placed on data are incredible compared to the U.S. And so because we are a pure play company, we have no other need for the data except for auditing processes.
I mentioned to Todd Carlton, I've been hearing from some crop producers that the values in the carbon market just aren't all that impressive right now. He said if you have range or pasture land especially, take a look at what's available there. The economics, he said, aren't that bad at the moment. I also visited with Anna Pavlovic of the Agoro Carbon Alliance. I asked her about the permanence of this market. Will it be around a while?
It's definitely here to stay. I think many iterations and changes of the market over time, and it's obviously had its ups and downs, but I think the commitment from so many global companies is real, and I think it's here to stay with us in the ag industry.
Are there meaningful financial gains to be had here by producers?
There are, and I think a range of flexible options, right? And it depends on your farm. I think one of the things we see is that people kind of have heard rumors or preconceived notions, and they worry that they're not eligible, they don't know what it would mean for them. You really have to, take the time to dig in and see what it could mean for you.
We thank Anna Pavlovic and Todd Carlton for answering some of our questions about that carbon market. You probably, as a producer, have many more. You can go to their website to see some more questions answered at agorocarbonalliance.com. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bioproven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bioproven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. We want to give a shout out and a hearty thank you to the first responders who worked so hard in recent days, the men and women of law enforcement, firefighters, the folks with the tow trucks. Man, they've had some mighty, and the linemen and women too, power companies. They've really had to struggle to keep the lines energized.
Yeah, that's right. That heavy, wet packing snow in a wide area of the country that was impacted by that winter storm, as far south and southwest as the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, as far north and northeast as New England. Snow, ice, and wind, the rotten combination of wintertime. In contrast, where we need moisture, and yeah, December was great, January was horrible, and there's just not much going on in the moisture department for now. Into the Pacific Northwest, we've actually seen some worsening now of the drought after some modest improvement the past few weeks. There's a little prod of some Arctic air near the Canadian border, otherwise downslope winds. So what's there? A snow cover evaporating away. A nice recovery on temperature, but at the same time, here comes another front, and you're certainly on your toes trying to keep track of temperatures, but little, if any, organized moisture. And a pretty quiet weather picture from the Red River back west into the northern Rockies and Pacific Northwest. Hardly any significant moisture till maybe the upcoming weekend. So the issues continue on here. Great outdoor work weather, not great from a moisture department. Nor this week into central and southern California. Typical setup of the high, and this setup means a northeast wind flow and Santa Ana conditions. I wouldn't be surprised. We've got maybe fires breaking out again into some sections of the southwest and southern California for this week. Last week's snow and wind and cold replaced by high pressure and a pretty comfortable go of it. Yes, the drought is worsening again onto the central and southern plains once again, typical of La Nina, not what we saw back in the month of December. Little change with the position of the high, northeast wind flow, delightful outdoor work. The runoff is getting underway in some areas of the higher peaks of the Sierra We are now below average on moisture totals for the wet weather season out there. Quiet, cooler, high pressure and a quiet weather pattern for much of the central and southern winter wheat belt here for this week.
Well, what about the northern plains? Have they been picking up some precip? Not too much, though.
Not too much. Yeah, that snowpack is varied. You can almost see it on some of these Arctic air masses where the center of the coldest air lays out into the Red River Valley of the north and through the upper Midwest region. But this is a warm front of the move. There's wind involved. We'll bring down the snow cover a bit. The footing for man and beast a bit precarious. Hardly any snow cover and snowpack across areas west of the Missouri. And clean up and recovery if you're still in that mode over the central and southern Corn Belt locales. And again, in absence of any major winter storms to flow in northwest to southeast for this week. Gusty winds out of areas of the northern and central Rockies. Seasonal high pressure and temperatures across much of the Corn Belt. A little drabble of snow up towards the Sioux, and that is it. A breathing of relief for many areas of the Plain States and Corn Belt locales off of last week's storm, which made it all the way down, snow and ice, into the Red River Valley of the south. Yeah, the moisture was great where we did see it. The cold maybe not necessarily so. A couple of showers across the Gulf Coast area. Those settled to the south and east. Mild to warm weather for the time of year in through February. Central and southern plains. Cool off slated for the Tennessee Valley. But again, no major systems this week across the central and southern plains.
Many of our friends who like the winter sports, cross-country skiing or snowmobiling, they're enjoying the opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Plenty of snow this season into the upper Great Lakes region and parts of the northeast into New England. And finally, that snow drought has eased up in some areas of the Corn Belt. And that snowpack will be here to stay here for quite a while and clean up and recovery where we've seen ice as well from last week's storm. Otherwise, pretty much uneventful. The warm front moves on through. A couple of clipper systems on the move and just a dash of snowfall for the upper Midwest, Great Lakes region into the northeast and New England. No real super cold air in sight whatsoever this week for the Corn Belt, the northeast and New England. A couple of showers down through Florida. Had some severe weather with that winter storm last week in this part of the country, but it's cool, dry, high pressure. And other than a couple of showers lingering across the southern mid-Atlantic region, all quiet of the weather seen this week across the deep south.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. We have a friend who's an agriculture weatherman. I noticed the other day his wife, who is also a scientist, posted that the groundhog's accuracy is only about 40%. Christine obviously is responding to your sensitivity to this.
She has, but you know, that was during the height of that Midwest and Northeast and Southern Plains storm. So I just kind of brushed it off per usual. But you know, when that critter always sees his shadow in the headlights of my car each and every year.
Oh, my goodness. How's precip shaping up here in the week ahead?
Quiet and uneventful, thank goodness. We had some moisture of significance, and it's here to stay. That's the snowpack and snow cover double digits into parts of the Corn Belt. Made it all the way down in patchy form out of the southern plains, but this is where the organized moisture, and this is primarily clipper system, lake snows into the northeast of New England, early in the week down through Florida, at least the mid-Atlantic region, later in the week across central and south Florida. The drought continues on, and it's expected to worsen. That's what we've been telling you, typical of La Nina, and little, if any, organized moisture across the west, with the exception of the Pacific Northwest towards the upcoming weekend. That's it, a breather for one and all, including the weather guy.
Well, then the Louisville Farm Show is coming up in the next week, and we can recall years of slipping and sliding and freezing outside that building. How will it appear next week?
Temperature-wise, not bad. They had that ice last week, mind you, so hopefully they're back to where they need to be. And kind of on the southern periphery, some mild air. The wind coming off the Rockies and settling on southward at all levels of the atmosphere, so we get this warming, even with the snow cover through the upper Midwest, a bit below Gulf Coast area, some warmth across the western states. Otherwise, not much going on. Maybe parts of Big Sky Country, a couple of weak systems, a little moisture here that will be of benefit into Texas. Still some wet weather shower across the southeastern part of the country, and an unusually quiet stretch of mid-February weather from a winter storm standpoint across the upper Midwest and Corn Belt.
That blob of much above temperatures that you pointed to for the week of February 21st, will it still be there?
And as we see it right now from a temperature standpoint, no. Again, kind of an anomaly, and it's a fast-moving current of air up aloft. And once again, out of the Canadian Prairie into Hudson Bay, James Bay, we reposition this cold air mass. The snow cover is thick. That's where these cold air masses like to kind of congregate too, so here it is here. So a drop-off in temperatures, nothing bitter, but a bit below average. Much of the northern and eastern Corn Belt, normal over the southeastern part of the country. The warmth will get suppressed down through Oklahoma, southwestern part of the country, and in through California. From a moisture standpoint, beginning to see signs of a little more regularity than of clipper systems, organized moisture, snowfall for the southern Canadian Prairie, upper Great Lakes to the northeast of New England, about normal in this part of the country, including the southeast part of the country. Little, if any, significant moisture in the drought areas of West Texas, the southwest, and in through the valleys of California.
Clipper systems, typically light snowfall, right?
Right, exactly for the last week. Now, things get a little more ramped up with the Arctic air and this trough beginning to re-establish itself right here across the heartland. The cold kind of backing up, retrograding below average from the Pacific Northwest into the northeast of New England. The warmth here in this part of the country, and we're getting a squeeze playing these temperatures, and we're into meteorological springtime, by the way, beginning part of March, and it ought to behave as such here. A little pickup on moisture. This is okay across the western Corn Belt areas into the Plain States as well. Probably some late season snowfall into the Corn Belt locales, the northeast of New England. Normal precip, including snowfall, where it's bountiful through the Canadian Prairie, upper Great Lakes region. Precip is okay and over the southeastern part of the country, the southwest, and the valleys of California. Certainly a different story.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
My goodness, how far we've come with ag mechanization. When you take a look at a tractor that's 100 years old, you're reminded of all of the advances that have come. It's not just living in the past. Those of us who like the old tractors, I think it's a real appreciation of the designers, the engineers, the entrepreneurs who came along with the new equipment. We'll take a look at this one at Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. You hear me talking about them every week. The beauty of those cabinets, their utility, how rock solid they are. Well, you'll be able to see them at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville. In fact, I'll be in the Store Lock booth in the West Wing at Louisville on both Wednesday and Thursday of that show coming up in just a few days. We hope you'll come by and join us. If you can't get there, go to the website, storelock.com. Yes, this one goes back 100 years. This Alice Chalmers 612. And it looks so basic. I mean, look, you can imagine how difficult that would be to spend a day on that tractor. But remember, this was an advance over the horses that preceded it, the living, breathing horsepower. In fact, the 612 was made by Alice Chalmers to use implements that could be drawn by the horses. Alice Chalmers turned out this tractor about 100 years ago. This one made in 1920. Mark Stock has a lot of great equipment every week crossing the block, and as he points out this weekend in his Big Iron Report, they're bringing some great prices.
Well, Max, we are continuing to see record-setting prices. On BigIron.com, folks, we sold a 1977 John Deere 4630 quad-range tractor with 8,200 hours for $21,000. Same sale, a 2013 Komatsu WA200 wheel loader sells out of Texas for $61,000. A 2004 Winnebago Mini Winnie with 55,000 miles. This machine sells for $25,000. Another example, Max, is a Bobcat 231 mini excavator that sold in April of 2019, sells on Big Iron in February for $6,000 more money than it did 3 years ago. Now moving forward, our auction on February the 9th features several retirement sales. T&K Farms Partnership are retiring out of Smithville, Arkansas. They've got a Case IH Magnum 315 mechanical front tractor. They've got a Case IH 500T precision disc air drill. Russ Smith is retiring from Mitchell, Nebraska. They'll be selling a 2018 Massey Ferguson Heston 2270 3x4 big square baler. Martin Ficken is retiring 258 items on their retirement sale. So Max, we're continuing to see great prices and outstanding equipment selling on BigIron.com. If anybody has anything to sell, now is an excellent time to put it on an auction.
And the FFA Spotlight this weekend, we go to Minnesota. Wyatt Halverson, who's the Vice President of the Minnesota FFA. Wyatt, where's your hometown? Put it on the map for us.
Yeah, I hail from Thief River Falls, Minnesota. So that is up in the northern region 1 of Minnesota in Pennington County.
As you're joining us right now, are you on campus at the university?
Yep, so I'm on campus at the University of Minnesota.
Well, what do you hope to do someday? What are you studying there now as a student?
I'm studying animal science, pre-veterinary, along with American Sign Language Studies. I hope to graduate from here and then also get a spot in their veterinary school and become a practicing veterinarian one day.
What kind of animals would you like to work with? Small animal practice or large or mixed practice?
Yeah, so my history is in all small, all companion animals, and I'd like to stay in that realm. While FFA has shown me a multitude of different things, I participated in the small animal veterinary science contest all throughout my FFA career. So that's kind of my group. That's my expertise, and that's where I'm looking to study and practice in the future. So
many students say FFA really broadens their horizons. Was that the case for you?
Oh, it was absolutely the case. I'm such an advocate for FFA and work-based learning and student career technical organizations. I couldn't speak higher of it.
What do you say to that young person who's a little reluctant to get involved? They don't know if they want to belong or not. What do you tell them?
They have the opportunity to unleash a floodgate of so many opportunities and experiences for them. They would be silly to not do something like this. I would love to have personal conversations with people. I would tell people to feel free to reach out to me. I would give them any information they want to know. And like I said, just can't speak higher of it.
Wyatt Halverson, Vice President of the Minnesota FFA. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Farmers this winter have a lot of new products to take a look at to help improve their yields. We'll have one in the spotlight coming up here next on This Week in Agribusiness. During this off-season, farmers have the opportunity to look over a wide array of products to help them boost yields. It seems like there are new ones coming along all the time. There's one from TerraSym that Mike Pearson wants us to know about this weekend. He shares this visit with us.
If you've had a chance to get to a farm show over the last year or two, there's a good chance you ran into a pink microbe. That product is TerraSym from Leaf Symbiotics. Joining me today is Matt Helms, the Chief Commercial Officer for Leaf Symbiotics. Matt, TerraSym's been out for a while. You've been running some tests. Bring us up to speed. What have you learned about the product?
Yeah, you bet. It's an exciting time for us. We're a new kid in this biological space focused on a pink microbe that, like you said, it really stands out. But we've tested our products with a lot of R&D for 4 to 5 years. And what's really the new news with us is we've shifted to a new delivery method. Instead of having to use in-furrow equipment or having a seed treatment, we can now apply this with your seed lubricant in a planter box, and it's been very well received by farmers.
That's fantastic. Matt, how available will that be this spring for growers who might be looking to try a new product on their operation?
You bet. We've actually had 2 partnerships announced in the last few months. One is with Talc USA. They're the premier only American mined talc product, which is the predominant seed lubricant today, to bring our product forward in a co-pack, as well as a new seed lubricant from Low Mutech. It's called Dust, and we pre-blend our products together. So we are widely available through several hundred distribution outlets, but we're also selling our product directly online, as we're seeing that being more of an option where farmers can access information and take that option in their own hands.
That is very cool. Matt, I understand that TerraSym was included in Beck Seed's PFR, Practical Farmer Research trials last year. Did you learn anything new about the product?
You know, what we learned is we really validated the performance that we saw. We're really heavy in R&D. About a third of our 32-person workforce is PhDs. And through all the small-scale testing and validation to bring the product to market, we saw a 2-bushel increase in soybeans and right at 4.5 bushel in corn. And it's interesting, the Beck's hybrids PFR data came back just right at or slightly above those numbers, about 2.6 in soybeans and 4.6 in corn. So we're excited. Obviously, that's a piece of research and agronomics that a lot of farmers look to in making their decisions. And the second year in a row, we've really shown nice ROIs through that program.
That's fantastic. Matt, before we let you go, how does this product work? What is it doing out there in the field?
You bet. What we do is we enhance root elongation. We've measured that through the Danforth Center, where we're based out of, over 2,300 root digs, large-scale commercial fields, 3 to 6% more root area, more key micronutrients, like iron and manganese that help in photosynthetic production and enzymes related to that. And then we're getting the bottom line yield enhancement. 75% win rates. We're really excited. Convenience that farmers are looking for. No additional equipment. They can go across all the seed brands that they purchase. And again, we're seeing a really nice response in the market with our sales to date.
That is fantastic. 2022 is on us. The planting season will be here soon. Matt, where can folks go to learn more about Terrasim?
You bet. The best place is Terrasim2022.com, and it has all the information on our science, our technology, and how to purchase the product.
Fantastic. That's Matt Helms, Chief Commercial Officer with New Leaf Symbiotics.
Our thanks to Mike for sharing that visit with Matt Helms, one of the good guys we've gotten to know, working to help farmers boost their yields. Well, in the week ahead, we'll be headed to Champaign, Illinois. The Premier Cooperative has its meeting there. I'll be moderating a part of their program. Then the week after, it's the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville. We'll plan on seeing some of you there as well. On behalf of Mr. Pearson and the rest of our This Week in Agribusiness team, we hope you have a good week. Have a safe week. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.